And we're live. Welcome back to another Corona Geek here, where we talk all about mobile app development using Corona SDK. I'm your host, Charles McKeever, and today we are a tight crew here. We've got Ed Marina from RoamingGamer.com, and we've got Sergey from SpiralCodeStudio.com. Hey guys, thanks for joining me.
You're certainly welcome.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. So, what's that?
I said hello.
Hello, hello. You know, I never know when that live thing is going to kick off. You hit the button and you wait, and then Hangout says,
Get that frozen face while I'm smiling.
"Yeah," and then there you go. But so anyway, well, we've got a great show today. We're going to talk about app marketing in China, some of the reasons why you might want to do that, and then some of the challenges that you might run into. We'll also talk about spawning enemies. Which really you could spawn anything, but we'll take it from the spawning enemy standpoint. And then we're also going to talk about how to get your app labeled as optimized for iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus in the Apple App Store. Apparently, this is a thing, and we want to do that thing. So we'll talk about some of that as well. Before we get to that, though, let's do the announcements. We've got some reminders here. So last week we talked about animated counters and content scaling on Corona Geek number 114. That was on Monday. And so if you haven't had a chance to go watch that show, definitely go check it out. We had some great tips and advice and suggestions that were laid out there. And then on Tuesday, Corona was acquired. And then, what was it, maybe Thursday? Yeah, I think Thursday we did a follow-up video to answer your questions about Corona being acquired. So if you haven't had a chance to go check all that stuff out, you might want to stop by the blog. I don't know, it was a fairly busy week. We did have a follow-up video, though. We had a special on it. I want to say Thursday. I don't know. It's all bleeding together. It may have been Friday, but anyway, it's out there. You can watch the whole thing. It's an hour long, and Jon Walsh, who is the CEO of Fuse Powered, and Walter Luh, our very own. They were both on there, and they answered questions. Sergey was there. Sergey asked a bunch of questions. Ed was, I don't know what Ed was doing. He wasn't there. But so Ed is going to go back, and he's going to watch the whole thing because it's going to answer all of his questions. And if you want to sort of skip around, if you want to do like snack size stuff, we took that whole interview, whole hangout, and we split it up into 11 different videos. So some things aren't, not everything is represented there. You might want to go watch the whole video. But if you just want to skip to like, is Corona going to add additional staff, or will there be a marketplace, or who is Fuse Powered? You can go and watch those, and they're about 2 to 3 minutes long. So go check those out, and they're all over there on YouTube.com/Corona Geek. You can go check those out. All right, that's your public service announcement for that. Also, if you haven't had a chance, go over to Corona University and watch the latest videos that are there. We've got quite a few going up, and we have some on Windows 8, Windows Phone 8, that have recently gone up, so go check those out. If you're into the Windows Phone arena, or you're thinking about it and you want to see what's involved, go check those out. Also, if you are looking to bone up on Corona and you need some resources, go check out burtonsmediagroup.com. You can save 20% if you use the coupon code CoronaGeek at checkout. And Dr. Burton's got a whole bunch of books over there on Corona development, everything from, if you don't have any programming experience at all, you can go over there, and he's got books on that will kind of take you through the process of what a variable is, if you don't know what that is, and how to store and move information around, and then he's got everything represented in Corona. And he's really good about updating the books as needed. So if something happens that changes in the SDK and it's important to you, and you purchase the book, he'll update that book, and you'll get that update. We got to figure out how to do that so that he gets paid every time. Because right now he's doing it all for free. He updates all those all those books for free. Which is fantastic for anybody who buys one. So save 20% when you use the coupon code CoronaGeek, all one word. Also, there's a Clash of Clans group, which I may have to become a member of because my Clash of Clans starting to fall apart. People are leaving the clan, and we're not able to declare war. And if you're in that kind of sort of thing, or if you just want to go over there and join, and you're interested in what that company is doing with Clash of Clans and how they're making millions of dollars a day, go join the clan Corona Geek. Anyone can join. It's an open clan, and Dr. Burton's over there, and Chris Byerly, the developer of Coronium, he's over there. And you can just have fun with it and pick it apart, maybe learn some things, take some notes on some of the, I don't know, not game mechanics, but the game mechanics are fine, but also just the game design, some of the psychological things they're doing in order to draw you back to the game on a regular basis. Also, if you are into skinning widgets, you can go to cravecreative.com. I'll put a link in the show notes, but Mike Hempfling, sorry, Mike. Mike's got some widgets over there that he has skinned, and they're very nice. He's got 3 different widget libraries or themes that you can use, and they look great. Here, let me pull those up on the. See if I can pull those up here. We got which one of my screens am I looking at? I think I got it here. It's one of these tabs here. There it is. So if you go over to his developer resources, so once you're on cravecreative.com, go to developer resources in the navigation, and then you can click on Corona widget theme. There's a 1, 2, and a 3, which we will, of course, like I said, we'll link in the show notes too. But he's themed all of these, and then he has different colors that go along with each one of those. So if you're into that sort of thing, you don't like the current widget themes, then you can go and find just different versions of it. So that's lots of fun. And I think he's got them reasonably priced. There's a lot of work goes into that, a lot of design work and things. So thanks, Mike. I think that's it. Do you guys have any announcements that you want to make? Sergey, you got anything?
No.
No.
Not yet. The word is not ready.
Not yet. Not ready yet. Oh, you're working on something though.
Yes.
Okay. Super secret. You gonna give us a hint? Any hints of what it is? Any spoiler alerts?
You know it.
Oh, I know it. Okay, I know it. I'm not going to say it. You need to say it. I'm not going to be a spoiler. Okay, so what about you, Ed? Any? Nope.
Nothing.
Ah, man. Okay.
I'm working.
You're just like a lazy genius.
I don't know about the last part there.
It seems like there's nothing, and then boom, all this stuff will be there.
Yeah, I accumulate for a while.
Yeah.
My problem is I work on a number of things, and then if I pre-announce and then I don't finish something, it's disastrous. So
that term "lazy genius" comes from my wife. She's what she calls our children, lazy genius. I don't know exactly what it means, but I think it's positive.
Sounds quite good. Yeah.
I don't know. We're going to go with good. It's positive. It's got genius in it. Somewhere in there, All right. Well, last week we announced the winner of the 2048 Hex gameplay, which was our very first games. So Karim was the winner of that, and he got a $50 gift card to. I think he chose iTunes, which that's a lot of gift card for iTunes. But if you got some stuff that you want to buy, the app, I mean, you can use it for like other things besides
you can
apps,
buy
right?
apps for Mac.
Yeah, apps for Mac. So that would be great if you wanted to buy a tool to do app development or something, or just goof off too, I guess. So Karim won that. He's got his gift card. So what we're going to do now is we're going to. I think the next game we're going to play is Dr. Spin. We've had those guys on. Scott Shapiro has been on, and he's talked about Dr. They published that under the label of Code Delivery Boy. We'll put a link in the show notes to it, but what we're going to do is we're going to play that until December 1st. So on December 1st, we will announce the winner, and then that will give us a chance to sort of reset things and do another game for December. So if you haven't seen Dr. Spin, you can Google it, iOS Dr. Spin. It's a fun game. You actually move your device around, so it's got it's tied into the accelerometer and zetas, and then these zetas are what we're going to key off of. So the person with the highest accumulation of zetas is going to be our winner for December 1st. So go check it out, and I'll also post some things along the way to kind of help remind us to go do that. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Scott's going to provide us with a few promo codes. So be sure to look for that on social media. Maybe we'll just get those out. I think it's a 99-cent app. What's that?
I remember I have tried this game before running on my device, but it wasn't working. I hope now it works.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I haven't had any problem with it. It's played fairly well on everything that I've tried to play it on. So yeah, we'll see. It's like I said, when you collect your zetas, then you ultimately unlock characters. Which at first I thought about using Dr. Spin as the game, but then for the contest. But then I was like, well, all I could remember was unlocking the characters. But then Scott reminded me that, oh yeah, you accumulate these zetas, which has a score associated with it. So we're going to do that. All right, let me see here. I'm looking at the notes, and we need to get into our geek speak. Let's do the conversation about app marketing in China. Do you guys target any particular geographic area with your apps?
Nope, just the Americas.
Just the Americas.
Global.
Well, yeah. You do it all?
Global. Why not?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, exactly. Why not? Did you do it? Do you see a specific breakdown on do you track that as to how many versus free?
First place is USA, and the second place for me is Russia, of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You probably have your apps are translated into translated, not translated for you, right? Your Russian apps are Russian apps. They're translated in the U.S.
TensorFlow are translated into Russian.
Okay.
Hey, let's back up for a second. You said target. The key word there was target, which when you said target, I said the Americans. So yes, I always click all for distribution.
Oh.
Okay. But I don't do anything special to prepare them for other markets.
Okay, well that's a good distinction. Yeah. So okay, you can take an app and you can publish it to, let's just say, all the marketplaces, and then but specifically if someone wants to download it, let's say in Russia, and English is not a second language for them or whatever, then, or if they just want to have it in their native tongue, then you're not catering to that particular market in that respect. Is that what you're saying, Ed?
I don't do any localization.
No localization, which is a fancy word for it. Yeah. So, well, there was an article in Forbes. Let me see if I can pull it up here. There was an article in Forbes that was talking about if you wanted to target different areas. So let me just read you my notes here. Basically, it says 72% of your potential customers are not native English speakers. Okay, so that's and most of them would prefer to have the app in their native language. I can attest to this from my own experience. I was in the military in Okinawa, and I had a Hispanic roommate. And when he would meet someone else that was Hispanic, they would speak Spanish so I asked him one day, because I was not speaking Spanish, you're always sort of on the outside of the conversation. I asked him one day, and I said, well, why is it that clearly we all know English, so why is it that some people choose to speak a different language when they meet somebody? And he said, well, let me ask you this. He says, if you went to Germany and you knew how to speak German, but you ran into an American, he said, what language would you speak? I was like, oh, I speak English, right? He says, right, because that's your native tongue, that's what you're accustomed to, that's what you are most fluent with, and that's just what you're comfortable with. So when it comes to apps, it's no surprise that would be the same concept, that people, they want to use something that's in their native language. And and I've seen apps that are translated sometimes that don't necessarily, they don't always get the translation exactly right, but it's nice to see that they try, because I speak Russian and I wouldn't be able to use an app that was in Russian. So yeah, that's enough said about that. But it did go on to say, this Forbes article did go on to say that when you're deciding which language to adopt, app designers and entrepreneurs need to ask themselves whether they're shooting for volume or paid downloads. So I thought this was an interesting distinction because you have different characteristics or different behavior in different countries. So they said if the goal is monetization, have the app translated into Spanish, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Korean, and Dutch. I mean, that's obviously you don't have to have them translated into all those, but if you're going for monetization, you can pick one or more of those because these markets are more accustomed to customers paying for downloads. So I thought that was an interesting one. And then it says, but if the goal is to maximize downloads, so if you want to say, hey, we've had a million downloads or whatever, he says translate into languages like Mandarin Chinese, Portuguese, and Russian. I assume because Sergey, do you feel like the Russian market is more paid apps or less paid apps, or do you know?
Not sure.
Hard to say.
Hard to say. Probably more likely to be free.
You think so? I think it. I mean, I think it just depends. But I mean, there was an article here. You remember Dean Murphy? We haven't had him on the show in a while, but he's a developer in the Corona community. And a couple of years ago, he put out, which I thought was interesting to see the parallel here. Forbes, putting out this article saying, "Hey, app localization is important," and then, 2 years ago, Dean was saying that app localization is important, and he said in his article, Dean said that let's see here, he said in 2012 he found that 85% of apps were free downloads, and that was 533 million apps, and then 15% of them were paid downloads, or 90 million. And then the breakdown kind of went through, and it was, let me see if I can find my notes here. Basically, the breakdown was kind of interesting that, let's see, looking for I thought I noted this someplace here. Just to see if I can find it again. Yeah, he said that the English-based stores, U.S., Canada, U.K., and Australia, amounted 632 million apps. And then out of that, 85% were free, 15% were paid. Australia had the highest free-to-paid ratio, with 20% of apps downloaded were paid. And then the U.S. had the lowest free-to-paid ratio, which was 13% of apps downloaded were paid. And again, these are 2012 numbers. So Dean started wondering, what about China, Japan, Korea, France, and Germany, which is some of the countries that Forbes had already mentioned in their article there. And he said that within the 5 countries, 699 million were downloaded in August of 2012. 67 million were in English stores. Let's see, 67 million more than English stores. So in the English stores we had 632 million, and then in the non-English stores we had 99 million. Then out of that breakdown, he said that 91% of the almost 700 million were free, versus 9% which were paid. So again, if you're talking about China, Japan, Korea, France, and Germany, 91% were free and 9% were paid. And then he said China had the lowest free-to-paid ratio, with 6% of the apps were paid. So again, which kind of mirrored the Forbes article that said, basically that if you were interested in. I'm not sure I understand. Oh, Siri doesn't understand. She doesn't understand. I don't know, Siri. I don't. You tell me why.
Siri doesn't get it. Okay.
Why aren't people buying apps in China? Yeah, she says I don't understand. That's hilarious. I love when she just pops up sometimes. You're just talking to somebody and she's just like, you're like, whoa, oh yeah, I forgot I had that plugged in. So anyway, I think it's still interesting. I mean, regardless of the outcome, whether you think you'll get more sales or not, or you get more downloads or not, at least it's something to sort of consider when you're targeting different geographic locations. So there was another piece of Dean's article. Let's see here. I thought was interesting. Oh yeah. So anyway, so the rest of Dean's article goes on to explain how he was localizing his apps. So basically, how he implemented the code for that, because he said that rather than target one particular market, so if you could either target the U.S. speaking market, or you could target the non-U.S. speaking or the non-English speaking market. Sorry, he said that why not target the 1.3 billion people out there, and have a better chance of getting your app distributed and getting in front of people.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so that was interesting, and then that kind of got me into thinking about, well, what are some of the challenges? And so, have you guys seen any challenges? Sergey, what about you? I mean, you're getting your stuff translated to English. Do you do that yourself, or do you have it done by somebody? Or?
Yeah, I'm translating to English by myself, and I must say that sometimes I make more mistakes in Russian than in English.
That's interesting. Why do you think that is?
Russian is a difficult language.
Okay. Yeah.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah. Exactly.
I said as much last time.
What's that? Yeah. Well, like you said last time too. I mean, I was taking some Spanish courses, through apps and various means, and it's every language has its own nuances. So. Well, yeah. So I looked around and I found a Wall Street Journal article that talked about some of these things, some of the challenges that you might face as an app developer. And one of the things, first off, was free versus paid. Again, is that culture, that country, going to be more prone to buying apps or more prone to looking for free downloads? So I'm assuming that if you have an app that maybe has in-app purchases, or maybe is ad supported, or maybe you're just trying to use it as a lead generation for your other apps, then getting it into a market where people are accustomed to just downloading things for free would be a good way to go, because then you could use that. You would know for sure that these people are accustomed to downloading, and then if you wanted to have a market where your app is just completely paid, and obviously, you need people who are accustomed to paying for things. So that was a pretty clear one. The other one I thought was interesting, though, that I didn't really consider, is clones. And I think you've talked about this before, Ed, is being getting something out quickly and being able to capitalize on it before somebody swoops in and just copies it straight out.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a challenge.
I want to note about translating applications. If you want your application to be translated in many languages, go to some publisher who offers that. So I know that many publishers, they do translations for you. So you give them screens and strings of language to be translated, and they do it for you. And you need to integrate it only.
Are there? That's a good tip. Are there any issues with when you do your app updates? Do you then have to? I mean, now let's say that you add additional features or something changes in the app.
Well, if you have new strings to be translated, of course, they need to be translated or updated.
So that's something definitely to consider, is that if maintenance.
Right.
So then something to consider there might be to roll your app out systematically, so that you try to, I don't know, get the best value up front with the least amount of work and least amount of maintenance, and then maybe roll those out to others once you know more. Or what do you guys think about that? Do you think there's a strategy for it?
Well, I'm actually sitting here while you're talking, thinking about what you said on translating to Chinese, and I'm thinking this is not exactly an answer to your question, but one of the big challenges is Chinese is not a Roman character alphabet, so you'd be translating to Pinyin, which is going to be hell unless you have somebody who can do it for you.
Oh yeah, I definitely think that you would outsource this to somebody, and there are services that do it these days, right? I mean, it's not.
But the challenge I'm thinking there is not only do you have to get that translated into the symbolic alphabet or words or however you want the opinion. But then you've got to have some way to display that. So you're going to need a character set. There's a lot of work there to get all that back into your game and displayed.
If you don't use bitmap fonts, Corona can handle all Japanese and Chinese characters fine.
Yeah, well, let me give you an example. I hear what you're saying, but let me give you an example. Let's say that you've chosen a game font, a Roman alphabet game font for your game that you like. It looks good. It's got the nice curvature and whatever. It looks good in your game. And then you want to go get that translated, but you're going to be restricted to fonts that are available that support all the other characters.
Well, if a font doesn't have specific characters in it, it just falls back to default font. With Cork most of the time it looks okay.
I'm just, I don't think I'm.
Well, maybe. Well, let me ask this. Let me say this, and let me ask this. The first thing that I think of is not necessarily the character set itself, but just form factor. Maybe is a different way to put it. Is this kind of what you're talking about, Ed? Where you're having to, between translations, between English and say Mandarin Chinese, you're having to display that information differently because the characters
don't even exist in your font.
Right.
Most fonts basically standard Unicode and whatever. A limited number of Roman characters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Not these traditional Chinese and characters that we're talking about here.
You can find most of the time fonts that are that support all the European languages and a different set of fonts that support all Asian languages. So you can have two sets of fonts in your game and swap them dynamically.
Yeah, I'm just saying that there's real work there to get that.
But it's not.
To get one that looks great.
I think okay. So Ed doesn't want to do it. Sergey.
No, I'm not saying don't do it. What I'm saying is I'm trying to make a point here.
No, I'm just messing with you.
Let's say that you do all your text in your game with built-in new text.
Yeah. You're
going to use a font, either a built-in font, a font from the device, or a font that you include with your app. Likely, that's going to be a Roman-based font, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. However, what if you choose to go with bitmap fonts? Well, then you're going to have to use an external tool, produce a sprite sheet with the fonts, and then use that in your app to produce your text. And I think in the case of people who are going to be localizing, they'd almost be better off going with bitmap fonts, because when they want to put in the other non-Roman characters, they're almost certainly going to have to use a bitmap. I cannot imagine that a font file that would be loadable by Corona would support all of the thousands of characters that there are in the Chinese language.
There are such fonts. Why not? Oh, you mean bitmap fonts or TrueType fonts?
Perhaps, yeah, TrueType fonts.
TrueType fonts are fine. They support all the Chinese characters. Simplify Chinese.
I mean, we're talking thousands of characters.
Yeah, so.
It's not an alphabet. That's the problem.
But would you have to have all of those characters? You're talking about thousands of characters. Do you have to have all those characters, or you just have to have
these characters are not letters. They're words. That's the problem. Or they're subwords, where you combine them to make a word. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Bitmap fonts are somewhat simpler because you only have that many characters in your game, and you can extract all the symbols used in all the localized strings in your game and put them into a tool that will make you a sprite with font with limited number of characters. So
that sounds really simple.
So there are like thousands of characters in Chinese. Yeah.
This is why your game should say start, stop, pause.
Exactly. Keep it simple, baby. No credits.
No, it shouldn't say so. Just glyphs of square, like 2 bars for play and arrow. That's all.
There you go. Yeah, it
You
means
better see.
yeah, just
Get
make
the
it.
pictures.
Yeah, right. That's what I was gonna say. Make it pictograms or whatever, so that
Yeah,
you.
there you go.
There you
Look,
go.
I translated it into your language immediately.
Well, it's I mean, it's not too far fetched, right? Because then you don't really have to do anything.
Uh,
Hmm.
For
Okay.
example, Machinarium game, it has only symbols, no characters, no words in it, and it's playable by in any language.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, obviously, like we said, I mean, it's a bigger undertaking. Especially even just let's just skip the font thing for a second. Let's just say you get all the characters you need and all the resources you need or whatever. Um, if you translate into, let's just say, 10 different languages, and then you update the app, and now you have to go back and do translation for 10 different languages, right? I mean, you may not be the whole translation of everything, but you still have to maintain 10 different versions or 10 different translations. So there's that, and then there's also just cultural differences. So the difference between saying it one way in one language versus saying it another way, which is why I would definitely hire that out to a translation service if I didn't feel comfortable expressing a concept in a different language. And then so then the other thing they talked about was that in the U.S. you've got Google and Apple and a few other app stores, but apparently outside the U.S. there are other app stores that are more localized, more you have to consider those as well if you want to try to get your surface area out there as much as possible. So that was a consideration, which takes more time and energy. And then the one thing that I did see that popped up on the radar here is that there were the security concerns, and this comes from specifically from China. So basically, I don't know if you guys have been keeping tabs on things, but as of September 26th, there was an article that was put out that talked about from Android Authority that talked about Samsung being banned in China. So, and I'm sorry, let me clarify that, by Chinese officials. So if you work for the Chinese government, they say you can't use Samsung devices in your government position.
Because they want to maintain security of their own.
Well, yeah, everything comes out of the Snowden thing, right? So a lot of sensitivities there, and then also I mean you can have conspiracy theories about open markets and competition, and giving Chinese companies more latitude than non-Chinese companies and all that kind of stuff like that. But it really just comes down to the fact that the Chinese government is cracking down on things based on a security mandate, and Apple as well. Apple was banned in July, so Apple products cannot be used by Chinese officials, in the execution of their duty, and also Windows 8. Windows 8 was banned in May, so so you're kind of like, it's not specific to any one particular platform, but it's kind of interesting that. It's an interesting footnote in this idea of trying to target a particular country. So just know what the political climate, what the what things are going on in those countries as well. Makes you sort of a news hound almost. But there was an article from Bloomberg, so this was another footnote that was interesting. They said that as of this year, in the first quarter, China had a 31% growth, but that actually even represented a slowdown according to IDC. So, but it still outpaces other markets. So China itself is exploding in growth in the mobile app space, and I think that was evidenced by the keynote that we saw by Apple. Apple spent a lot of time talking about their introduction to China and trying to target the market there as well. So the other thing it said, smartphones from the California-based company and South Korea electronics giant are popular with Chinese shoppers. Samsung has the biggest share of the market, while Apple is in fifth place, which I find hard to believe. I did see another report that said that 90% of the apps that were purchased were iOS. So I don't know if that they were talking about devices, the popularity of devices, or they're talking about in terms of app app purchasing. And then the other interesting footnote that I thought here, because I'm always thinking that feel like we're behind in terms of technology. US is behind because there's always, here in the US, everybody tries to the telecom companies and everybody, they're all trying to squeeze every dollar out of their equipment that they can get, whereas in some other countries they have broadband connections are a standard, and just it's part of their infrastructure and part of their economic development and that sort of thing. But it said here that there's one development that's widely expected to help Apple and Samsung, and this is again in China. It says the long-awaited deployment of faster 4G cellular networks throughout China should stoke demand for higher-end devices that support it. So I thought that was interesting because, do you guys have 4G where you are?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, I thought that was interesting. I was like, I would assume that China would already have 4G rolled out.
You'd think they'd have that already.
Yeah, you would think.
I feel bad for them now. They're still running on 3G?
We have 4G in just the biggest cities. It's like in the beginning of adoption, but 3G is almost everywhere.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. I can get 3G anywhere. That's not a problem. So that's the fallback. But 4G certainly makes a much better experience. And if you want to download a game that's 100 meg or whatever.
Pretty much need it.
Yeah, you need something. Yeah. It's the difference between closing the app, closing the device, and coming back later and being able to play it instantly. It's just a better experience. So anyway, so those are some interesting things that came out of that. We'll put links to the show notes to all of those articles so you can go read them for yourself. If you have experience selling apps in China, leave a comment. We'd love to hear, what you think about it, and if you have any sort of blog write-ups or any kind of information to share with us, let us know. And if you want to be on the show, anytime anybody wants to be on the show, just leave a comment or shoot me an email, coronageek@coronalabs.com or charles@coronalabs.com, and we'll get you on the show. Let's see here. Let's talk about, what do you guys want to talk about next? You want to talk about, look at my notes, you want to talk about being labeled, or do you want to talk about spawning enemies?
In what?
What? You want to talk about being optimized for iPhone 6 or enemies? You want to look at some code? What do you feel like doing? Spawning? Okay, we got 20 minutes left. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Let me pull up the example here.
Is this from the blog post?
It is. So if you go over to coronalabs.com/blog, there is a tutorial over there for spawning enemies. And let me find my... I think I'll just do this screen, which means I need to move that.
Shuffle.
I do have to shuffle. Let's see here to get the... All right, can you see my screen? I think you can. I can see it. I can always see it here, but sometimes, there's been times when you said you can't see it.
There. I know what you're saying. That you can see it in your Google window.
I can see it in my Google window, yeah, which is up here. Let me see that one. So yeah, I got my Google window up there. All right, so what we've got here is a pretty straightforward example of spawning enemies. Let me see if I can bump that font up. It's going to require some scrolling, but all right. So the simulator on the right has these little dots, and if I refresh the simulator, then I get some randomly spawned dots, which we're going to call enemies. And if you notice, every time I refresh the simulator, they change, which hence the random part. But you also notice that there's two dots on top of each other, but if you'll notice, there's 4 dots that show up in the beginning, like right off the bat, and then the rest of them fill in over time. So let's look at how that all breaks down. So let me pull up another piece of software here. Get my OmniDazzle out. You guys seen OmniDazzle? It's a cool little software for being able to kind of annotate on the screen. There it is. Yeah, so it's the Omni Group puts it out, called OmniDazzle, and I've got my Cintiq pen here. So what I'm going to do is I'll hit 1. That gives me a little dot, and I can draw around on the screen. So it's kind of cool. So I'm going to hit that to clear it. I'm going to go push this to a different screen now. Okay. So we've got a couple of things. One is we've got a forward reference here for spawn timer. We're going to create a table to store some spawned objects. And then we've got another one here for creating basically a table of parameters. And those are going to be used over in our function calls. So basically on these 4 here, this xmin, xmax, ymin, and ymax, those are the boundaries. So basically we want our enemies to spawn within a particular boundary. We don't want them just to sort of spawn off the screen or something like that. We want them to spawn within a certain area. At least for this example, I mean, you may, for whatever application you're putting together, you may want it to spawn off the screen. But for our purposes, we want them to be within the boundary. We also want them to spawn within a certain time frame. So if you notice, whenever I refresh the simulator, let's see if I can get the simulator up here. See how they kind of come in slowly. So we're saying here we want them. There's our time that we want them to spawn in. Then we want, for this particular example, we want to do 12 different items. So we've got these guys here, which are our first 4 that are initially spawned in, and then we have our green ones, which are our 12 that get spawned in later on. So here's our 4 that get spawned in right off the bat. Okay, so let me see that. So that's that. And then once you've got those things set up, you've got 2 functions. You've got a spawned item function, and let me hit the thing here. And then you've got a spawn controller. And it's kind of hard to see. Let me kind of bump this down just a little bit. But on the spawn controller, basically what we're doing is this is where we're going in and we're going to loop through and call the spawn item, and we're going to spawn whatever spawn, basically we're going to spawn an object. We're going to spawn an enemy each time. So let's before we get to spawn controller, let's go back up to spawn item. So spawn item is pretty straightforward. We're going to use, in this particular example, we could get more elaborate with it, but for simplicity, we're going to just create a circle. And in this case, we're going to just, it's just going to be a little circle, those circles you see on the right-hand side. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give it a fill. And what I did was, in the original example, it just made all the dots all exactly the same. But that didn't highlight the initial versus the objects that were spawned later on. So what it is, I went in and I said, okay, we want to spawn 4 initial enemies, and then when we've spawned all of our initial enemies, then we want to move on to do something else. So I basically said, as long as we're spawning our initial guys, that I want them to be red. And then after we've kind of moved past that, then I want them to be green. And so that's all that is there. And then what we're doing is we're positioning them. So we're saying, okay, create this circle, give it a color, and then put it in the the X and the Y. And those are going to also all going to be randomly generated within the bounds of whatever we said we want to keep within our boundaries. And then each time we spawn an object, we're going to add 1. We're going to kind of get the count of the number of objects already in spawned objects, and then we're going to add 1. So we're just incrementing that as we go. And the reason for that is that we might want to key off that later if we want to know how many objects we have, or if we want to maintain their state, or we want to do something like that. We don't do any of that here in this example, but you could. So let me clear that. So that's the spawn item. So basically, anytime that we're spawning an item, this is what we're doing. We're creating a circle, giving the color, randomly positioning it, and adding to the tracker. And then in spawn controller, so we've got spawn controller, and then below that, just back down a little here, and then below that is actually where we call our spawn controller. So in spawn controller itself, just back up a little bit. We are doing we're doing a couple of things. We're going to pass in what action we want to happen. So we're going to say, do we want to start it, stop it, pause it? What do we want to do? And then we're going to pass in our parameters, which we defined at the top of the code there. So we created that table with all the different parameters in it. And then what we're doing is we're saying, is it a start or a stop action? Because if it's either one of those, then basically we just want to kill the timer. We want to cancel the timer. That way we free up resources and move on with our lives. Otherwise, let's see here. Otherwise, if we are I'm sorry. One caveat to that is that's if we actually have a timer. If we have a timer already and we're doing start and we're doing stop, then we're going to kill the timer. We're going to refresh it and get a new timer. But we'll get the new timer down here when we're doing the start. So when we start, what we're doing is we create a local variable, spawn bounds, and then we put all of our boundary information in it. And then we create some other local variables for the time, spawn on timer, and spawn initial. So remember, the timer is how fast we want the enemies to spawn in. The time spawn on timer is how many enemies we want to spawn, and the spawn initial is how many we start out with. So in our case, we started out with the 4 here, and then that's weird. And then the other thing here is that we've got some optionals. So everything that was in our parameters table there was optional. So if we wanted to, we can just kind of populate these with some ors, so that if we don't supply something, we have a value, and it should be some sort of reasonable value that we think we would use. For example, like we want to spawn. If we don't want to provide a value, we would want to spawn at least one new enemy every second. So that's a reasonable value. And then what we're doing is we're coming down here and we're saying we're going to figure out, are we spawning our initial guys? We're spawning our initial enemies, and if we've said we want more than 0, then we'll go ahead and spawn our initial characters, which are our red dots. And then after we've done that, we'll move on to spawning the rest of the characters, or the rest of the enemies, which I think in the example the code was something like this. Okay, so it was kind of looked like that, but for our purposes here, I've put it all in one line just so we can talk about what it's doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to spawn, if we have spawn on timer, which is the green guys here, these additional guys. Want to we've got the spawn time, which is how fast, I think it was like 200, how fast we want them to spawn in. Then we've got an anonymous function where we say, okay, we want you to go ahead and spawn an item within these bounds, and we want to do that X number of times. So in our case, I think we said 12. So up here we were spawning our initial 4. Here we're spawning our next 12. And each time we do, we call spawn item, which spawn item had all the information on where they were supposed to, where they were supposed to be located and what color they were supposed to be and all that. And then that's it. So each time you refresh, you just get a different layout every time. And then of course within this function for within this controller function, then you have conditions for pause and resume and all that kind of stuff like that. So if you want to pass in a pause the spawning or resume the spawning, you could. Did I? Let's see here. I'm looking at my code down here. Did I must have. There it is. I got rid of something. It's never good when you hit the keyboard and you get rid of things. So any questions? Anybody got any thoughts or comments?
Could you roll back a little bit in your code so I can see the top?
Yeah, let's see here. What do you want to see? You want to see spawn controller, or you want to see the
I
very
want to
top?
see where your variables got declared.
Yeah, so in the spawn params, is that what you're talking about?
Well, okay, you've got a couple of, okay, roll down to spawn controller for me, please.
Yep.
You've got spawn on timer and spawn initial.
Mm-hmm.
Where are those declared? I didn't see that. Oh, they're right there. Local
Yeah,
params. Ah, you're moving.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I see what you're doing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so the params, yeah, and I had that same question initially. Let me just scroll up just for conversational pieces here. The spawn params is a table, a Lua table that has all of our values in it.
Mhm.
And then when we do the spawn controller, the parameter name is params,
Mhm.
which when we make the call, and that's one thing I probably should have highlighted, is that when we make the call, we do two things. We say, what do you want to do? So you want to start, stop, pause, resume. And then we pass in the spawn params, which is really our Lua table of values, which sort of gets renamed into params.
Yeah.
And then params gets, the params get extracted. So params.xmen, ymen, that sort of thing, that gets extracted into these this local table, because I assume because each time that we're going to loop through and do our perform with delay, then we're going to call that, and we're going to it's really a unique item each time. So we could, if we wanted to, maybe change that in some way, and then as we add that to our character count, we could maybe treat each enemy differently depending on what properties or characteristics they had.
For the table spawned objects, it would be cool to use a special setting which is called weak table. You know weak tables in Lua using set metatable?
Yeah. Well, why don't you elaborate?
Yeah, tell us about it.
The reason why we'd want to use a weak table.
Weak table, I haven't played with it myself right now, but I want to try once I have a reason for it. It's when you put an object on it, and when it's the only reference to the object inside this table, it will be garbage collected and removed automatically. So when you are removing your spawned items for some reason, you don't have to remove them from the table manually.
Hmm.
So
what you're saying is make your tracking tables weak tables, and you don't have to worry about cleaning them up.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually.
Definitely.
As long as it doesn't itself cause one of those scenarios where you're sort of referencing. No, I guess it would work. So you always get into the situation when you're referencing an object in a table that you need to be very cautious that it hasn't been removed or hasn't been destroyed. Because you could have a reference where you've actually called remove, and then the reference is still valid, but it's just a table at that point. It's no longer an object. Anyways, yeah, that's a good idea.
If you're doing that though, you probably know that could happen, so you would probably want to take that into account. All right, well there you go. There's a pro tip.
I got a tip for you, but I wanted Sergey's input on this.
Okay.
Could you roll back up to your params, the part where you were copying over the parameters? So it's actually down right there. Right. 48 and on. So one of the things, now I use parameterized functions all the time, which is what you got. Spawn controller it's got one variable, which is action, and then it's got a params table. I love this because it lets you add more parameters later without changing the signature of the function. The bad thing is you can get into a scenario where you're extracting that part where you put the red line just now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that you had a field there called spawn bounds bigger, and let's say bigger was a Boolean value. Like bigger, if you set that, it would double the spawn size, the spawn boundary, just to make up something. And let's say that you wanted to default to true. So you would say spawnbounds.bigger equals params.bigger or true. The problem is you could never pass in params.bigger equals false and get a false, because the or statement would preclude that, and it would be assigned the subsequent true. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay.
It would always be true. So your little trick where you're ensuring that it's been initialized wouldn't work.
What would be the solution?
Well, I have a solution, and my solution is that I have a function, a global function, because I use it all the time, called FNN, which is first not nil. And what it is basically you pass to FNN as many arguments as you want, and the function itself will look at every argument and extract the first one that's not a nil value and return that as the assigned value. And I see Sergey listening, so I wanted to see if he has ever run into this scenario and if he has a more compact solution. I don't like it for the sense that it is my phone ringing. It is a function call, which costs you time.
So basically, instead of using the conditional expression, you're using the custom call.
You can't use
function.
conditional expression is the problem, because the conditional expression will always default to true. Something, something, or true will always default to true. It'll always assign true, and you may not want it to. You may want to send a parameterized false, but that false will be overrode by the true after the or statement.
Yeah, my point. My solution is not to use it for false values. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, then I guess my solution. Basically what you're saying is if it's a false statement, don't
default it.
Yeah. That gets you into problems.
Or make your how to call it? Make the default value to be false.
Yeah. Okay. Right. The solution is if you can find a way to always make your default false, then you're fine.
Right.
People listening to this are probably going, what?
Do you have?
You don't even realize you're doing it. I just wanted to point it out because parameterized functions are great, but the first time you make the mistake that I just pointed out, if you're new or if you're not paying attention, you're going to be like, why is my code not working? Why is my code not doing what I think it should be doing? I set that to false. Why isn't it false?
So do you have? Is this FNN? Is this?
It's in the SSK library, so people who can just go to my site and download that, it's in there.
Okay.
But it basically all it is it's a function that takes ... as the argument, which it then converts to the arg, and then it iterates over that, and it's not set to nil, and returns that. If you want it, I can show you the code in like 2 seconds here.
Okay. That's okay. I mean, you can if you have it, and if not, the people can go check out Corona SSK, right?
Yeah, just go to my site or go to my GitHub. I'll give you a link so they can. I'll give you a link specifically to that file.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes then. Go check that out, and if anybody has any questions about it, let us know, and we'll talk about it on another show for sure.
So just a little thing, because this whole spawner thing is highly dependent upon your parameterized inputs, and so that's I know that's one thing where I stumbled. And I'm an experienced programmer, and it's real easy to do. You're like, I don't know why it's not working.
Well, that's good. That's good, yeah, because those kind of gotchas will cost you time that just, you can never get back, and we don't want that. So
it's all about assumptions.
It is. It is. So here's one of the things that I was looking at with this this example. Again, this was not a particular example of anything other than just randomly spawning items on the screen and that sort of thing. But then once I put some color to it and started putting, separating the initial from the timed spawn type of thing, then now it becomes almost a game. So then I was thinking, okay, well, what if you as you generated these enemies, you assigned or added physics turn them into physics bodies, and then add physics applied. But you, let's say they all you could do a variety of things. So I started getting into the design aspect, the game design aspects of things, right? So I was like, okay, well, what if you had they had these platforms, and then your goal was to get as these things spawned onto the screen, and then after they were all spawned on there, then you could touch and you could tap on like the green ones, and then you were trying to get the green ones into the chute, or if you could do where there's no lines, right? There's no platforms, and then you're trying to maybe get these into get these in a specific order without touching other ones, right? So maybe the ones on top, you don't want those to hit the ones on the bottom, or I don't know. I was trying to figure out like, how would you turn this into a game, because this, even as simple as this was, just having it all spawn these things onto the screen, I was like, this seems like a good starting point just to create a very simple game mechanic. So I don't know if you guys had any thoughts about that while we were just sort of sitting here chatting.
I try not to do that, but that happens to me too sometimes.
You try not to do what? Try not to...
I have to look at something and go, hey, that could be an interesting game, and then you're like talking, you go, hey, Ed, what do you think? I'm like, I don't know, I wasn't listening. I was thinking about making a game.
So if you guys... You weren't listening either? Good.
Well, hopefully the people who are actually, purposely listening to the show are listening.
Well, if you come up with an idea for this and you're listening, to the show, let us know, because I'd be interested to see how this works out, because it just seems like, as I was staring at it, staring at the fuzz on the television screen there, I was like, hey, this you could turn it into something. That seems like a good game.
All right. Well, the people who want to take this and turn it into a game will want to know that I have an example that does something similar to this, but it does one step further. It makes sure that none of the dots are spawned on top of each other, so that you get a better layout.
Is that on your site someplace? Is that a template?
Also, I'll give you a link to that after the show.
Okay.
Actually, I did an article on that, so you can probably get it through there. But how to create non-overlapping objects.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely, if you guys are looking for resources, go to roaminggamer.com, and also while you're out there, we'll put a link in the show notes, but go to spiralcodestudio.com. Both Ed and Sergey have written up pro tips and shared lots of little snippets of code and things like that. So go check out their sites for those resources. We'll definitely we'll put a link in the show notes. So the last thing that I want to say before we tip out of here, and really it's we don't really need to get into it too far, is this idea of being able to get your app listed optimized for iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus in the Apple App Store. So I will we can talk about it a little bit more next time, but I'll just leave you with this. Go check it out. It's a fairly straightforward tutorial. The steps that are involved have to do with you opening up an Xcode project and exporting some things out. But basically, you can download a small sample code project here that's as part of this tutorial. And then you add an image to the project, you change a text label, you produce a small file, which you then need to include in your Corona project, and then you update your build settings, and then that allows you to have a specific branding that shows up in the App Store. So it's not like your app wouldn't work already, it's just a matter of the App Store highlighting you as, I'm using air quotes here, optimized for iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus. It's something that triggers that so that the App Store will actually label your device or your app as a special app, opposed to everybody else who just supports it, that doesn't have this flag. So go check that out. We'll put a link in the show notes. It's on the Corona Labs blog, and everything that you need should be there. And there's even comments below. Read the comments below from other people who have used it. It's an interesting conversation down there as well. All right, guys, that's all I have. I think that's a good show. Lots of information, lots of snack-sized bits, and we'll be back here next Monday talking about mobile app development using Corona SDK. Until then, have a great week and happy coding.
Dos Vidania.
Bye.
Bye.